So, welcome everybody for another episode. We normally have a little video that plays in the beginning that kind of sets things up while we're testing the system, and then we have a little message that comes with it. However, it's chosen not to operate today. Whatever reason, we tested it. It was working earlier, but it didn't want to work now. So if you've noticed that certain parts came up, then the sound was all broken up, or whatever else, we're not quite sure what happened there. But I guess the technology is a little bit sensitive to what we're going to play with today. Anyways, so in this episode, we're going to be in part 2 of episode 18, clearing up and looking deeper into what is taking place. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the real, true operating system so we have a deeper understanding. Now, what is going to be shared is really not in any way to create more polarization or anything of that nature. It's really giving us the opportunity to understand the mechanics and how things came about, what we are working with, dealing with, what we have as an opportunity for us to advance in a powerful way. And also to give us a deeper understanding how things played out and the stages that are taking place right now to bring us to another level of this human experience and playground. So a lot of times, people say, well, don't take this information as factual. This is just entertainment. Well, I'm not saying it's entertainment. This is really to stimulate what you already know that has gone dormant within yourself, or in some cases already got some of the pieces together, and now and so forth. So just let what resonates resonate. What doesn't, it does not matter, because at some point certain parts of it will make more sense to you, and you'll have a deeper understanding of what's going on in that regards. So, are we good?
There's just a message up here on your computer. I just want to
Okay, just hold on a sec.
I don't want to lose connection.
Oh, what's going on? All right, we're not understanding what's going on, but that's okay. All right. We're definitely being challenged with this episode, because prior to this I had some notes that I wanted to cover, and it quite didn't come together either because there was a lot of technical issues that came about. So this is going to be interesting. So we're going to fly with this, and we'll do our best, and we'll see how it goes. If there's any interruptions and so forth, I am also recording this on the camera, so I will post it separately so that you will have a copy of it and that you can watch at a later date. But right now, we're going to continue with the streaming, and I'm going to get Kimberly to just keep an eye on it time to time to make sure we don't get off line or anything like that. We'll do our best. Okay, so what I was saying in regards to this remembrance that we are triggering within ourselves. So in essence, what we're doing is just triggering what you already know within yourself that, we've kind of tuned ourselves out of. So take whatever resonates for you, and whatever doesn't, at some point or another, will become part of your understanding. Because what is shared here is not to kind of create another storyline or anything of that nature. It's really for you to kind of understand it, but you have the freedom to choose how to navigate. So one of the lines that I had put in when we put this together was, if you're ready to take the 10x, I didn't write 10x, the red pill. And if you remember the Matrix, there was the blue pill and the red pill. The blue pill was you kind of stay in your dream state, stay in your current life, and the red pill was that we get to go deeper into the rabbit hole and have an understanding how things really work, and really the capacities and power and that you have within yourself to really navigate all aspects of it. So not that it's related to that, but the same thing. It's in a way we're now going to the next level, and there might be more than two parts to this because there's so much we want to cover, and we want to also address some questions along the way too. So to go further, and one of the other statements I made is buckle your seatbelts because we're leaving Kansas, which is another line that was used also in the Matrix. So it's so to create the playfulness and lightness about how we're going to look at. Now we started talking about, and I did cover some of the operating systems that exist, and I want to give you a deeper understanding of how it came about, how it works, and how it is there in our current situation and what has been. So the first thing we want to understand, I know somebody had brought up a point and said that, I was not made, that we're all source and so forth. Absolutely. We are source. We've always existed. We are all part of the fabric of all existence. And we have co-created every part of it. Doesn't matter that we are an individual signature that has come here to play in different playgrounds and so forth. The only thing that was actually created is expressions of ourselves within our signature, but then the playgrounds, the various playgrounds and the vehicles that are used on those particular playgrounds was the part that was created. Now, who created it? It was aspects of ourselves that had achieved a certain level of source consciousness and was able to tap into the creation and designing of these playgrounds. The purpose of the playgrounds is really so that we have some place to experience ourselves away, not away, but within source, but in a different theme of sort, right? And the physicalities was the part to experience the theme so that we can record our various experiences. Now, of course, the souls and everything always exists. However, it's like this. Let me give you an example. Okay, you could say, well, my refrigerator always existed. Well, yes and no. If you're looking at the actual materials, yes, to a certain level. So you had the metals, you had the plastics and so forth. But again, that started off at somewhere. We had to start off with bare metal, which was what do you call it, an element, or in this case, a metal that had to be forged and shaped to create a casing or something of that nature. Same thing with plastics. It was created from oil and whatever. So the basic fundamentals of the essence always existed and will always exist. It did not take a form until we created what we call form. But the form is still a holographic projection because this is a powerful video game that we are playing. So when you look at it, we've always existed. It's true. However, the playgrounds are constantly being created, shaped, modified, and all of that. And that's all it is. So we understand that part of it. But the thing is, we've come here to play. And we've come here to experience it. And as much as we have agreed from a soul level and from other aspects of ourselves as the physicality, as Gaia, as the human entity and all of that, to experience what it is, but it also came to experience it and also create a shift in its playground and so forth. So this is what we are going to play with to get an understanding how it works so we can shift it. So it's not outside of us, it's always part of us, except that we are now just upgrading that whole experiential component. So it's not separate. It can't be separate. We will always exist. There's no way not to exist. At some point, the merging, what we call the coming together, blending of various signatures of souls, will just keep blending so that there'll be multiple of these souls now becoming one, and eventually it all becomes that whole field of sourceness starting from ground zero again. But when I say ground zero, we're not talking about without the experience, because as source, what we do best is basically create realities to experience ourselves, our creativity, our imagination, what we can do. So that's how it works. So we're not discounting any part of the fact that in one way or another, you have to feel that, there's something outside of you create. There's nothing outside of you. It's just aspects of yourself that have taken on various roles to create various experiences, and that's what we're doing. Now, all of us have come here because we've agreed to be here and whatever else. But at the same time, we've taken on different roles. Some of the roles is, I'm going to come to experience it and see what I can do. Some of us have been here many times. Others are just here for the first time. And some of the souls have come here that have never, ever been here and have always experienced higher dimensional consciousness and different dimensional states of playgrounds and so forth. So they've come here. So just to bring everything back into alignment here, and we're going to look at these software programs that actually I started talking about, which was the Satan codes and the Lucifer operating system. So I'm going to use, of course, what I'm going to show you at this point in time does no justice in really the depth, because I can't draw or express very powerfully what really is. So I'm just going to give you examples to get a perspective of what's going on and how it actually works. So many of us, so let's take this. Let's say this is the field of source. It's source, okay? It is the very existence, the fabric of our existence. Everything is within it. Nothing is outside. I'm just showing an analogy here. Okay, this is the field. We call the field, sometimes it's called the field of pure potentiality, but it's a field where there's levels of consciousness that are constantly expanding because of all its playgrounds and experiencers. And within that, realms are created. Now, at one point, and this went on for a while, okay, of different creations, and different creations had different levels of experience in the sense of how much it brought into its experience the knowing of its essence of sourceness. Now, I know that many of the playgrounds had gotten to a point where they do not recognize that there were source, so they could play the game much more effectively. So when you're looking at all these planets and solar systems and galaxies and universes, those are just all level within this field. Okay? So we have source. So here we are. We're source. Now, each and every playground has a program. And the program, which we also call the matrix, because each planet does, each collective planets also has a matrix. The matrix is the operating system. Okay? This operating system allows to keep a fundamental structure of how to experience oneself on that playground, which is basically a very elaborate computer game or video game, if you want to call it that, with very enriched sensorial. So here's source, okay? And it's created multiples and multiples and multiples and that of different playgrounds, different experiences, and different levels of consciousness. In some cases, it started very low and started to experience itself in various degrees of awareness of sourceness. And each degree of awareness of sources elevated the experience and also creation. Now, at some point along the way, as these individuals become more aware of its sourceness and is able to design new playgrounds, they get together as so-called engineers, if you want to call it that, to design. And this is why the universe expands. This is why, the galaxies and playgrounds and so forth expand, because we're just creating other versions of it with different operating systems, with different matrices and also different physicalities, which are still the same thing. Along the way, it was decided with a small group that we were going to create one program that was extreme separation from source. Not that that's even possible, because you're still in the fabric of it, but we created the illusion, and the operating system had no, or at least it simulated that as much as possible, no connection of its source essence, and not even using higher spectrums. So what they did, what was done, it was a program that was created with very low access to consciousness, and I'm talking about source consciousness, and also using low spectrum of light. What was the purpose of that? Saying, okay, we're going to create something that is so far disconnected, and it's an appearance of a disconnect from its source essence. And it is a software, it's actually a complete launched program. Now, so that was the program. And they called it the Lucifer program. So that was the program. So within this program, it had the most disconnect and the most unconscious part of source essence, to create playgrounds or people, or not people per se, but beings, to take it on and then create various experiences within that. So this was created quite some time ago, this program. Then along the way, various beings at some point or another had decided that they were going to modify themselves to the point where they could actually take on that operating system. Because you had to be very disconnected, or actually make enough modification that you would not have any interference or input from source. Because here you are in the field of light, and you have to diminish the input of that light, that consciousness, that full spectrum that was coming through, so that you could actually really activate and utilize that program. So that was the program. Because somebody had asked, what's the difference between Satan and Lucifer? Okay, so this is just the name of a program, a very elaborate program. Now, there have been races that have, created a hybrid version of themselves. And I mentioned the Draconian and Anunnakis as the ones that are closest to us. There are others on other parts of different dimensions, and also other parts. So that program with those hybrid beings have established other planets that they operate fully in, okay? Which, it's just part of that operating system that supports it. Now, in all of those planets, they have very low exposure to what we call light and so forth, because they operate within a very low range of light. Because the more light it comes in, more access, more unstable that operating system is, because the light is coming from source essence, even though it's in the field of source essence, but we can disconnect ourselves and so forth. Then we had this other operating system, which we call Satan. Now, this is, first of all, there is no being. It's just a program. And the program has been adopted by various beings that have chosen to play with that, to utilize it, to see what they can do with it, and how much it can challenge other aspects of itself that are not choosing that. So, once you take on this program and you install it in your operating system, because this is a full operating system, so I should say it's an operating system. Who designed it? No, I didn't. It was designed, there was not a specific, what do you call it, beings. It was a construct with a few that have come together, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, when that was put into place. Okay? So it was written, designed by that to create the most extreme polarity possible at that point. You say, okay, and it took some time to figure it out because there was always a back end or a weakness within the program because it's surrounded by so much source essence. To be devoided from it really required a lot of closing down access points and really creating that in powerful integrity so that it would not come off of its design. It would not, what we call evolve, right? So that was that part of it. So the operating system was used by various species, and they actually have, created those certain polarities on different playgrounds. Now, when it comes to planet Earth itself, Earth gets retooled every so often. Okay? And what do I mean by retooled? A planet is a pocket of consciousness itself. It's still a part of the video game. But the players that come in there have been other, what you call series and models of physicalities. That's the part where I said that part is made. But what is it made by? It's made by aspects of ourselves, could be even yourself that was involved at some point at a soul level, that have, in one way or another, have come together and created. So basically reprogrammed the Earth's operating system, upgraded or made modifications to what we call Gaia, and then reseeded, creating new sentient beings, and a lot of them were adopted from various other planets and so forth, and new physicalities. So if you look back in Earth's history, and there is discoveries that have been made, the human form was not exactly the way we have it now, because this is a newer design. It's the latest design, actually, in a sense, because it hasn't been retooled since these particular bodies were made. So when Earth got retooled, okay, each time it got retooled, it was repopulated again with other physicalities, with different levels of consciousness, and then souls have chosen to go and play there and have certain experiences, and they always, as we did, always knew exactly what they were going to play with. Now, planet Earth, at this point in time, has been offered 4 times this particular operating system. And we are on the 4th time. Now, the last time before this one was the Atlantean times. It was also offered at that point. And it was accepted as a challenge, as an opportunity for massive growth. An opportunity to have so much resistance that in one way or another, as it made progress, it would be able to really raise the bar on how powerful we can be. So it was offered. So we had this offered. Now, the original design, the original retooling of this particular series was 15,000 years ago. And I know I've sent this several times. It was not until 5,000 years later, which was 10,000 years ago, this marker not always the best, this operating system was reintroduced. Now, the original operating system of 15,000 years ago had a matrix. It was retooled. All these particular sentient beings, what we call plant life and animal kingdom, oceanic kingdom, insect worlds, reptile worlds, and all of that stuff was all brought in and modified slightly to kind of create the playground we call Earth. Now, Again, these are all holographic projections, they're light spheres and whatever else you want to call it. But at the same time, and all of them had a certain level of consciousness and access, or what it actually contribute. Then these physicalities were made and put into operation. When these physicalities were put into operation, it had a very powerful operating system. I know I've talked about it, I'm just reminding you. Okay, so a very powerful operating system. So when the so-called modification after 5,000 years of running the original matrix, the original operating system with what we called organic 3D. I'm not talking about, because a lot of people talk about, oh, we're going from 3D to 5D. And I know I said this many times. It was never really, and I will explain a little more how that worked in the inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D. Okay, so when the 10,000 years was put into place, when it stepped in, the Lucifer program was brought in. Okay, so this, again, was not easy to be adopted by humans because we couldn't modify the operating system enough. So part of this created modifications where our operating system adjusted enough to be able to adopt it, but it was never ever installed within us as the players are coming in. So it was still outside influence in a sense, and when I say inside, in the playground, without installing it directly in the human physicality operating system. However, a lot of the back-end operating systems were all reflective of that. So now when we're looking at it, when we talk about to do that, not only change the operating system, there was a requirement to install a software that would accept what was being provided and created another level of separation. So this is when the ego was put in. And the ego was an operating system that created all of these levels of disconnect within ourselves. And this is what that code is. So this is a code of operation that has been installed, which is all part and parcel. I never said this before, but I'm telling you now. I know I said it's AI. I know it's from the inverted matrix and all of that stuff, but this is what I'm telling you. We all have it in us. As long as you're operating within the ego, you're operating in this field. Now, this is non-religious here. We're not talking about the perceptions and ideas that have been talked about. You know, we have to fear this and fear that, or this is bad, good, all of that stuff. We're not talking about, these are codes. These are just operating systems. This operating system just separates you from accessing your sourceness. This is why you have all that chatter. This is why you're driven through stories, programs, belief systems, and all of that stuff very powerfully because of that operating system. Now, this was required to be able to function in the inverted matrix. And what is the inverted matrix? I know I said it many times. It basically allows you to experience and operate in reverse. Everything is backwards. So that we're actually not seeing ourselves as source or as anything. We're seeing ourselves by the program that this is dictating. So that's what the inverted matrix did. And then the 3D inverted matrix that we've experienced was able to launch. So basically, in the inverted 3D, everything is backwards. But this was the operating system. Now, we do not say, this is bad. It's an experience. Because the moment we judge it, it actually is the one that's telling you to judge it. The ego judges because that's what the operating system does. The operating system says you're nothing like this, and that we have the good, bad, right, wrong, and all of that stuff, and the judgment and the fear and all of that. So we're just basically giving you a background of all of how this actually works. Now, where does this come in? Well, this operating system could not be plugged into the humans. However, how do we dominate? How do we take over a planet? And when I say take over, plug in that particular experience. If we don't have players, because at this point in time, it can't be maintained, because all of this is not sustainable, the operating system, if there's not something that actually continues to drive it. Now, so the Lucifer program, once you adopt it, that's when they were called Luciferians. It's just the name that they become. So they, in essence, they're saying, I am now a Luciferian, meaning that I've adopted the Lucifer program, and I'm going to use that as my navigation, negating most of the rest of the operating system. Because of the level of sophistication of the human, specifically this particular series, and the various inputs, this is why I said that the DNAs, a lot of them got turned off, because, and also we were cut off from the organic matrix and only were having access to the inverted matrix, which was projected. So to maintain that, we needed players. So there was physicalities that were brought into the planet, the same way all of us were, through birth and so forth. But in essence, what occurred is that there was a blending that took place. And the blending was sort of a genetic modification. So what happened is you took the whole human part, you're looking at the human operating system and what we call the human body, and blended it with a body that had adopted this full Luciferian program. Okay? So now you had what they call draconians and Anunnakis and so forth. Those were plugged in and blended to create the opportunity for this to be instigated and to be operated. Go ahead.
Do you want to just maybe share how they were blended? Like, was it abduction? Like, are they from other planets when this happens? Like, can you kind of share?
No.
What
They were.
is this?
Okay, yeah, they were done. So some of these species came in, not the reptilians, but the draconian Anunnaki. They had come in and basically had basically what you can call sex or whatever it is with that. But a lot of times that did not happen right on the planet itself. It happened on ships or anything of that nature, so that they could actually blend their genetic encodements and so forth. And because their blood or their what you call stream of light codes within themselves had that in there, it now merged. And this is one of the reasons there's a lot of focus on keeping the bloodline intact. And if there's any blending, it has to be something that is not so powerfully rigid so that it could actually morph to be able to have this program as the main. So when we're talking about the absolute elites, this is the ones that you really don't have that much access to, are not on the front line. Most of them, a few are, but most of them, that's what basically they are. They're hybrids. That's why they call them hybrids. Now, we're hybrids ourselves. But we're hybrids that created this particular human physicality. They went through the hybrids of blending those two. Okay? So with that, this is how we've created this structure. Now, the reason for that, as I showed you on the pyramid thing before, they sit at the very top. And when I say sit at the very top, they take on various roles that dictate down the line here. Okay? So the thing is, a lot of the stuff that you're hearing and coming to the exposure of the sacrificing and all of that stuff is required because this program operates in very low frequency, and those frequencies have to consist of fear, anger, resentment, disempowerment, rage, and it also in a very disconnected state where we can experience that being exposed to certain substances and so forth. Okay? But at the same time, it created all these levels of fear and so forth, and the disconnect feeling that somehow we had no control because this was the only controllers. Now, so this is why you hear about these things, because the ones that are hybrids at this point, which includes all this basically, do require specific rituals to keep that operating system intact. Now there is a race of the non-blended ones yet that are on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, whatever else, if you want to call it that, that fully operate in the Lucifer program, which they call themselves Luciferian. But they're, that's just a label of when you take on the program. So, however, right now it's very difficult for them to be on planet Earth. So they're not. They're not. And the changes that I've talked about where the inverted matrix that we had in place got all disconnected, so that now the organic matrix makes it even more difficult for them to do so. Plus the spectrum of light coming from the sun and also from the galactic sun and the energies of planet Earth makes it quite uncomfortable, unsustainable actually, for them to be able to operate in that program because there's too much light codes and consciousness to be able to say, I want to stay in this very separated state from, which is all illusionary, but from any connection or any upgrades that I can possibly have within my operating system, because we want to still maintain this. Now, of course, some of them have been playing this for so long that it became very comfortable for them to play that role, in a sense. Now, of course, that's not going to be stable for a very long time, but at the same time, at certain playgrounds, it's not really supportive. So it's not supportive on planet Earth any longer, even though with all these changes, we are changing. Our vibration is changing, the frequency is changing, what we can call the Earth frequency is changing. Our consciousness is bleeding through, because the true human aspect operating system is overrunning this part that's in there. And it's overriding this part, which is basically the ego, which is just an operating system. So it's changing that. And what's going on, it's losing it. So this is why for some time, we're talking hundreds of years now, actually a few thousand, that even though, like I said in the last one, there was different upgrades at different times. So the original implantation was 10,000 and 5,000, 35, 1,500 and 300 years ago. All of those modifications. But it became more and more difficult to keep that operating system functional in the same way. So by doing that, they have a lot of rituals they have to do on a regular basis, and they have to manipulate or stimulate us to be able to fight amongst each other, judge amongst each other, to lower the frequency of ourselves. As long as we're afraid, as long as we feel disempowered, as long as we feel that we are subjected by the systems and so forth, then that's still maintainable, that operating system can function. And this is why the ego goes over time, that's breaking down too, because it's no longer supported. And I'm not going to repeat any of this stuff because we have already, is no longer supported. So it really needs to stimulate either itself or a lot of the exposures that we get. Go ahead.
First of all, I was just going to say, so it needs to stimulate negative emotions
Correct.
in order to function here. That's their gasoline that
That's
keeps
right.
them going.
That's their
lifeline.
food. That's their fuel.
So they need to create an environment where we're in fear, anxiety, stress, survival, and that's what they feed on, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that is an absolute necessity for them to be able. And this is why most of all the systems that exist create a disempowerment, create an opportunity for us to see that we have to be afraid of one another, afraid of what's going on, afraid of, viruses, afraid of anything and everything, and then to also to conflict with one another, because this is one of the reasons the wars were put in place. And this is why even when the wars could not be instigated, that there was always the fear that there was going to be one, or the fact that there's always villains out there, and that we, somehow, there's victim and victimizers, and we have to fight them and so forth, because all of that was taken in place as a requirement to keep our vibration low enough to be able to sustain the operating system. So it's basically supporting these hybrids so that this particular program in the hybrids is still functional or capable of functioning. And then the ones that actually instigated, which originally wanted to bring humanity to a point where they can inhabit the planet, even though the planet's operating system would never support them. So they had to, create, enough destruction of everything that was on the planet, so that they would be able to come and take habitants, inhabit the planet. But it required a lot of effort to do so. Well, of course, we have agreed as a collective, we're not going there. So this is why we're doing it. So I'm saying all of this so that you understand what's going on. It's not about them and us, because as long as we're playing with that, then we're fueling it. So this is why we said we have to get to a level of acknowledging, appreciating, and loving, because love is something that carries a far, far powerful energy that does not allow that to operate at all. Okay? So when you can love all of this, it disintegrates the operating system or even accessibility to it. Okay? So when we're looking at all of this and saying, okay, well, we got these hybrids and so forth. Now, this was not able to be established and maintained this far without taking action. So what is the action? Besides the inverted matrix, that's no longer there. Besides bringing us in reverse, where everything was backwards, in the inverted 3D, and creating the software and the encodements. By the way, just to give you something to giggle at, you know the cartoons, they were saying, well, we got the angel and we got the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. Okay, first of all, there is no devil. That was the ego with its satanic code, or in that point, what we call code of separation of source and of control, which was the ego. And then the angel part was your higher self, the part of you that had a higher level of consciousness. Of course, this worked very hard to kind of look at whatever. So you could see the example here. Whenever you're asking for intuitive and guidance and whatever else, you will get it. You will get it. But then after that, guess what? The operating system kicks in and tries to discount it as much as possible, or give you polarity, create confusion, keep you so busy in dialogue, and it also fragments just because of that. So what we're doing is we're starting to recognize it, acknowledge it, and be able to keep it. Because when you actually say no with non-fear, when you say no without putting any power and attention to the fact that, oh my God, it's going to do something if I don't say no, then it doesn't have that effect, because the moment even your operating system turns around and says, what about this, what about that, whatever, and you go, no, we're not playing there, but you're now seeing it for what it is. It's the program. Were you going to say something?
Valerie had just asked, what part did Yeshua play in the Lucifer program?
What part?
Yeah.
I know.
Are you talking about Source
Jesus.
itself, God, whatever they called it?
I guess when Yeshua was on the planet.
Okay. So Yeshua's role was a evolved, highly evolved soul that was involved with the retooling of planet Earth at the last thing, that came in to activate dormant codes, which was the code of love. Okay? It came to activate the codes of love and was sharing higher consciousness just to stimulate so that the lights wouldn't go out within ourselves. Okay? Then, of course, this program with these players distorted the whole thing and made it look like he was, the Son of God, the only, whatever it is. But that was, and then of course all the stories related to it and so forth, just to create some confusion. And the whole idea of religions and whatever else. But he didn't come for that. Now, that's a soul that was involved in the retooling, that took on a human body, that came here as a messenger, if you want to call it that, but a stimulator, activator of codes and whatever else, to reignite, activate this powerful tool we called love. So that came in 2,000 years ago. Okay? When it did come there, because the dimming started to go so low that it required the next part. So that's how it came about. So his soul, which again, souls are not male or female, but he took on a male role because it was the best role to take on based on the collective consciousness of that time. The thing is, it takes on whatever role, whatever embodiment that would best serve to get whatever's necessary. So since there was a more of a focus to the male orientation as more authoritative, then that's why it took on a male physicality. It was not in the sense of saying, well, male was better than female. It had nothing to do with that. Because there have been times in our operating system where the females were in charge of, and were more esteemed than the men. But that was just the role playing back and forth that has occurred. So that was his role. And then another role player is presently on the planet at this time, activating oneness. And I won't say who it is. Okay. Which was part 2 of the equation. Again, coming 2,000 years later, and also really stimulating our own awareness. It's not that, I'm going to bring you, or anybody, see, I got to keep quiet. Okay, to bring you consciousness, it's to stimulate your own consciousness, your own knowing, because we're all source, all of it. You're not outside of it. And even this operating system is within source. It's not separate. So what happened is, within this operating system, we demonized the program itself. Because by doing so, you're operating within the program. That's how beautiful on that. Now, because of all the levels of consciousness, things that are stimulating and the frequencies that are increasing, the role players, the key role players that operated within this operating system, which is this, had to come up with ways to keep us in the sleep state. So, all these systems started to be created within the operating system to do reinforcement of this inverted matrix part. So, controlling the media, what you hear, what you get to believe. This is the interesting part. The belief is just that. It's a belief that activates programs and installs within our belief a subconscious reference of it. So the belief is only active in the ego operating system, AI. Because the knowing part is soul, and no matter what is exposed on the outside or whatever is being projected, it doesn't sway in that part. It may get caught up in it in a sense because the operating system is so rigid and so forth. So when you look at the media, and I'm talking about every resource, it is all based on this stimulation program. So it controls the frequency of music, the light show that we see on screens and on computers and on TVs and whatever else, as one, to put us into a trance or a hypnotic state. And then there's tremendous amount of suggestion that is providing support for this, and also creating and maintaining the programs within these operating systems. And it's necessary and beneficial to do so. Even all the religions that were created were all under the same operating system. It created fictional deities, fictional rules. It created, and I know I'm not here to offend anybody. I'm just saying what I'm saying is what resonates, resonate. Throw the rest out. It's okay with me. I'm just giving you just bits and pieces here. Because if you look at the religion, it creates and shares an idea of how things actually work. You know, sometimes you say, well, there's some ethics behind it. Yes, that's the lure part. But the thing is, most religions tell you how to think, how to feel, how to respond, what is right, what is wrong, what's black, what's white, all of that stuff. And there's no free thinking allowed. And when I say free thinking, even consciousness to bring in, because the moment you challenge it, you're brought back on aligned. Because if you notice that most of the people that start to become more conscious drop those systems. But that doesn't just rely on religion. It's all different cultures and ideas and belief systems and so forth that are being shared with these fictional aspects of whatever, which was all part and parcel of what we agreed to play with. However, with that level of realization, you see where these are not supportive. Now, if you look at it, okay, if you look at even the particular religions, they're all referred to in some way the operating system, that they still have to function, not that they're so much the hybrid, but the hybrid dictated, and using other playmates below that are willing to do so to support it. So they have to do rituals too. And this is why we're having all these exposures of finding out of pedophilia and whatever else, and creating dominance and creating extreme fears and using some pretty colorful different experiences, because that's the only way you can keep that. And what's an interesting note, if you actually look it up and say, okay, we're all familiar, a lot of people are familiar with the Vatican and, you know, the Roman Catholic Church and whatever else. Did you ever look up and say, okay, you know that powerful telescope that the Vatican owns, that actually monitors what's going on the other planets, that are also telling you there's no other life, but now started to break down with that? It's called Lucifer. Interesting. Because it's still part of the program. The thing is, this program to operate and the Luciferian to stay in alignment, they have to make themselves public. Okay? But we'll get back to that. Can you bring that up again after?
That they
Have to make it public. Yes. Did you have a question, or did you have anything wanted to share?
No,
I was just going to say, like, a lot of religions are fear-based.
Yes,
And
yes.
so they keep you in fear to keep you on.
Yes.
Right. So, because if you're not a good Christian or whatever, then you're going to go to hell. But
Or whatever, yes,
and then
exactly.
Satan comes into that. So I guess that would
Yes.
also come into them divulging some other, that's them giving you information that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And the thing is, religion only has power over this, not your higher self. Because your higher self knows it's all made up, and it will go along with it to allow you for this program to take over. But like Kimberly had said, It stimulates fear, it stimulates judgment, it stimulates separation, it stimulates the fact that we have to follow some ideas of something that was written at some point in time, which had gone through many modifications each and every time to plug in whatever was the colorfulest most part to keep everything at bay. Now, even like going back to the media, most of all outlets that are run mainstream are basically all dictated and controlled to be able to keep a particular agenda active. This happens with education too, because if you look at education, all right, true education is experientially rich. What does that mean? That means is that you are being shown how things are at this particular time with the opportunity for us to advance and to be fully who we are as an expression and as a contributor of the advancement of humanity. That's true education. However, our current education system that has been going on for a long time takes all of that out of the equation and basically dictates what life is. It programs you. And I know somebody had said that it programmed you for the industrial age. It programmed you to be a factory worker. Well, there is some resemblance to that. I'm not going to deny it. That's true. But the real motive is that free thinking was not allowed. The fact of memorizing facts that are dictated to the sense these are the only acceptable facts that created more polarity, separation, and focus of older ways of life was all part and parcel of that. Not only education, keeping any advancements out of the equation. The same thing with governments and whatever else. The role of a government is a representative. I know I said this before, representative for the highest well-being of their community. And to make sure that everything is made so that everyone flourishes and that there's a certain level of consistency with freedom at the same time so that there's no reverse effect. But it doesn't work that way. It actually works completely different under this operating system where it actually does everything else to minimize. The same thing with the medical system. Instead of using advancements, I mean, if there was true care without that operating system, that we are now looking for the best interest of humanity, then what we would be doing is allowing every little discovery, and all of it is focused on how can this be used while humanity goes through this transition, because eventually that's not even required. The same thing with technologies and everything else. It's all run from this operating system of lack, separation, and somehow we have to depend on a system to dictate. So if you look at the media, for example, and that is under many, many banners, it teaches you how to think, how to feel, how to judge, how to compare, what is real life in their viewpoint. Again, it's always never our true nature, but it just continues to focus on not really who we are. It does not focus in being natural yourself or even being creative expressive. It tells you what to wear, how to feed, what to eat, whatever. And the same thing with the food and everything else. All of it are all constructed to keep our vibration low. However, with everything that's going on, our vibration still continues to increase. If you follow the Schumann resonance, you see the bursts we're getting. If you look at the vibration of the planet, the vibration of humanity, how many are awakening, it's all increasing, 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 increasing. So their input control is minimized. Now, you have to understand, even the Luciferians, that's the ones that adopted it, including the hybrids, are finding it so difficult that they're saying, okay, we're only going to hold this game a little tiny longer because we want people to flourish and come to realize that, you know, this is what we're under, and I don't have to play this polarized role any longer. Because that's the thing, it's the polarized role part. Go ahead.
Someone is asking if those programs are no entities, do demonic energies actually exist?
Okay, so what we are calling demonic energies is when we operate in a very low frequency and we can summon certain rituals or certain seance, or use certain codes by using words and so forth. We're lowering the vibration, we're calling in entities that actually are very low vibration entities. So if we call it demonic, it's basically a name that's been given, but it's a very low consciousness that stimulates fear, stimulates dominance and control. So we have those on our disposal, but the thing is for us to accept it. And the only way we can accept it is, working in those frequencies. Especially if we're looking for power, because it's the same thing. I want power, I want dominance and control, then you have to lower your frequency, because at high frequency you want no dominance, you want no control. You're basically one with everything. And you see that harmony, you see that we are all playing together. And how can we all flourish? Because we can't flourish individually without flourishing the collective. That's the realization. So there's no dominance, control, or power, because the dominance, power, and control was all plugged in as part of this from this operating system. Because once we're overpowering or trying to overpower anybody, then we're operating in that system. We're lowering our frequency. And then we play with that. So does those entities and those energies exist? Remember I said at one point in one of my other, that there's pockets of consciousness. So what we call demonic, we'll call it D, is a pocket of consciousness that has been fed by many that have played with any of this stuff and created a library, because that's what it is. It's a library of energies and consciousness of that time, whenever it was carried and supported, so that we can tap into it. And then there's a lot of entities that play there. But those entities have no power over you. Unless you go into fear and whatever else, then it has a tendency to kind of probe you and sometimes we talk about getting attached, but to be attached, you have to be very low. Now the attachment thing is becoming much more difficult. They can't have that type of attachment any longer. So if you're going to go and get super inebriated, you're going to lower the frequency. But once you come out of it, okay, your vibration starts to increase. And then unless you have self-hatred, which is another thing, because the ego will say, hey, look what you did. You got drunk again, you got this, you got that, whatever it is. And I'm just using that one as an analogy. And then what happens is your frequency tries to stay lower, but eventually goes up, and that influence is no longer there. So, but the thing is, fear feeds it. Fear gives it access. And that's the thing. I'm not telling you to scare you. I'm just showing you that you actually have powerful tools within yourself to just, and to fear that I have to be in high vibration is still fear. Okay, so it's not about that. It's about, oh, let me observe. This lowers my frequency. Okay, do I still need to go play there? No. Then you say no. You acknowledge it, you thank it, and you love it, and you free it. So you no longer have to play in that range. That's all it is. It's playing within that range. So a lot of times people get together and they do seance, they do various different things that bring in various energies. And those energies are like just basically lowering the frequency and inviting or tapping into this resource and all the beautiful entities to come in. But that doesn't have any effect unless you still have a fear around it. And then at that point you will have the experience, but that still clears. The sustainability of all of this is getting harder and harder for those lower vibrations to play here. So in fact, the only way it can come is you really have to feel it, experience it in that fear state, or that disempowered state, or that victim state, or anything of that nature. Because without that, you can't open the door for them. They can't come in. Go ahead.
First of all, I was going to say, and that is their sneaky way too, to get permission to continue running
Yes.
the programs. Even though we say in our head, oh, we have free will and we don't agree to it, our program allows almost unbeknownst to us on a conscious level, permission to run the program.
Yes, because we still have to consent at some point or another.
Yes.
So the fact that you're getting engaged, you're giving consent for them to show up. And when I say them, being those pockets of consciousness and entities or whatever we call it. However, you know, the thing is, as long as we're giving power to any of that, then it has, you know, it can come out and play, basically come and play with us. So this consent part is really, at times could be tricky because, you know, we give consent without knowing. You could be at a religious function of some sort and you feeling that something is dictating and more powerful than you, and you're there as the poor, you know, begging or anything of that nature, then what you're doing is you're lowering your frequency and you're inviting those lower frequencies to come through. Because a lot of times, if you're getting a channeling of sort to some others that play with the channeling, if we actually go in a place where I supersede my own reign of my playground and I accept whatever's being presented, and even if it shows up with a little expanded consciousness, but we give ourselves to that, then it's consent. Saying, okay, you can take over for a little while. You can say whatever you want to say. So you can go from somebody that's spiritual and then all of a sudden shift into a different state where it's actually now something else has a power over you. This is why discernment comes in. Discernment is connecting from your higher self. Now, of course, you can't make a mistake or whatever you take it in, but you can stay in a certain experience for a very long time, and really, it's not there for you to play in that way. You were going to ask something.
Yeah, Terry's just saying, so by sending our love to even the darkest of dark, we are not agreeing with their agendas or actions. In fact, we are alchemizing dark to light.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why I keep saying that love, you know, to appreciate them and to love. This program, because when we're talking about love, I'm not talking about programmed love, because there is this version of love and then there's this version of love. Very, very different. And how different is it? This version of love combines both polarities, love, hate. But that love is love's based on rules and, what's the other word? Just slipped my mind. Conditions and so forth. And I love you if you play the game this way. I love you if we do this, this, or that. That is a polarized. So you can go from loving someone to hating someone. That is still in the confines of this program. And a lot of people get into relationships with the love that's stimulated through this. And this is why it is not in a sense where there's no judgment about it. Because love from here has judgment. I love you, but you got to meet these requirements. Or you got to be the same as me. Or you got to do what I tell you to do, or anything of that nature. And then that is the unnatural love, which is basically a construct programmed love. So when we're tapping into the source love, which is beyond unconditional, it's ultimate love, that love creates full spectrum, high vibration energy that negates anything that's going through this. And this is why some of the meditations, we always bring in love. Pretty well, almost all of them. We bring in the factor of love, because that way, anything that you have of these operating systems within ourselves actually loses its capacity to function. Because it raises your vibration. When you're going to source love, your vibration is so high that none of these operating systems have any effect or have any control over how you experience things. Okay? So this is why I was saying, I kept saying, is that you look at, doesn't matter if they are hybrid Luciferians, okay? Then you send them love. Now, you've probably seen a lot of so-called actors and different people in high positions in the movie world and whatever else. There's a lot of positions even in different corporations and so forth. These individuals itself, for them to be able to do what they're doing, they actually have to take on the operating system. Not take it on as their main operating system, they take on the operating rules from it. So it's whatever that part. So you know when they say you got to give your soul to the devil, that analogy has a truth, but it's not because there's a devil. What you're looking at is you're giving your power to the Lucifer program and disconnecting from, or reducing, access to your source. So what is it? You're selling your soul to Lucifer? No. You're basically choosing the Lucifer operating program over the soul's input. That's all. You can't give it away. You can't. That's just another illusion. The fact is, yeah, your soul could step out and say, well, if you're going to play there, I'm not going to hold on and stay there. I'm going to check in every so often, but at the same point. So this is why you see a lot of the so-called really, really popular people that are super powerful mainstream, they are also playing very interesting roles. And they take on various, and they display the symbolic part of it. Because a lot of the symbolism was hijacked, if you call it that, was taken over and recoded so that we actually seen it as reverse, which is still part of the inverted matrix. But you were going to say something?
I was just going to ask so the soul doesn't participate in the Lucifer program.
No. There are souls that do agree to support it to a certain degree, but it doesn't fully embody permanently, because most of the souls are coming in. So there are specific souls that have to make the agreement to say, okay, I'm going to take on this role, but they have to actually reduce the access and how much time is spent in there. So a lot of times these ones that are operating within this program have very minimal soul intervention or occupancy. The connection is still there, but it's not occupied because it's not comfortable, if you want to call it that. It's not the level of what that soul can play. The human entities, there are categories of human entities that maintain themselves as a low frequency to be able to inhabit those physical forms. Now, the true hybrids in most cases do not have even a regular human entity. They usually have what we call an alien entity, but it's not just a typical alien. It's either in the draconian family entity, which is a part of the body, or Anunnaki. Right, but those are hybrids too, because the draconian and Anunnakis are hybrids from the reptilian race. The reptilian race is quite advanced, and I know I said that in the last one, but I just wanted to let you know. So a lot of the operating systems, this is why they call it draconian laws and whatever else, because it basically all functions within that. All right. I was going to say something.
Was it how they have to tell you what they're doing?
Yes. So the key here is to understand that for them, one of the agreements from Source, if you're going to play this operating system, you cannot do it on the back end. You cannot be in any way, shape, or form without letting them know plainly that it's there. Yes, you can play with the illusion that it's not there, but it's there. So this is why tons of symbolism, and they're always telling you. And even some of the so-called I'm trying to think, event openers or various musicians or various stars, whenever they get involved into, say, a large event, that they actually play out the role so that they can show you, hey, we're being transparent without giving you all the details. So, but that's a requirement. Now, I know that the question came in at some point and saying, why does Source not remove it? It can do that like this, no problem. This can be turned off. However, wherever, we have to understand there's still free will. So the ones that have taken on these have gotten accustomed to it and want to keep it to a certain degree. The souls that are here on planet Earth in human form has said, okay, we're going to create more and more openings, but we really want to disempower this ourselves because we become empowered by doing so. And this is why even the last meditation, and if you missed it, just really check on all the ones we did just recently, was all about empowerment, because we want to become more empowered and basically navigate freely how much I'm going to give power to this or not, and when I'm going to turn it off, rather than take it away from me. Because then we're going into savior mode. And the savior mode is not empowerment. Because it says, well, I can't do it myself. Come and take it away from me. That's disempowerment. And we as souls have said, no, 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 no. We're going to create the playing field so that we know what's going on. We have the access points, and we can now move through it and become more empowered along the way, because now we could see and differentiate the different operating systems. Okay, so we can easily shift from that. Go ahead.
These are a couple comments here. The beings who took the Luciferian and Satanic programs, are they going to have a chance to evolve? And why do musicians, for example, who sold their soul to the devil, have a problem getting out of the contract?
Okay. All right. So the first one was that
the beings who took the Luciferian and Satanic programs, are they going to have a chance to evolve?
yes, they do. They do. Until there's a requirement, until there's no more requirement for them to play that role, they will play the role. Now, the ones that have taken it on at this point in time are getting tired of playing the game. Because, for example, when you're talking about the Draconian and the Anunnaki, and again, there are other species that have it, but they're not involved with us. They're not involved on planet Earth or in this part of our quadrant of our galaxy. So that's why I'm not even bringing it up, because there are other hybrids on different playgrounds. Now, a lot of them have, changed along the way. So, what was I saying?
We're talking about the evolving, them evolving.
Oh, right. So even the ones that have taken on the Lucifer program are starting to get tired. And when I say tired, not a physical, maintaining that lower frequency, because their surroundings are making it much more difficult for them to sustain themselves, and they're feeling a transition. So at some point, and some already have, and some have already broken away from it in the sense of saying, okay, we want out now. So in essence, they start to take the steps to become reintegrated outside of the Lucifer operating system. Again, it's a full operating system, so that they are now accessing a little bit more consciousness. So they have the opportunity to evolve, absolutely. They may stick around with it for a little while longer while they're still being of service. The same thing with the hybrids here. And then, you have to look at even the alternative stuff. Okay, I already talked about this in a few parts in one or two episodes ago. That as long as the alternative is presenting something, that's great. And it is. You want to know what's going on. But the moment you demonize it, the moment you go into hatred, the moment you see right, wrong, good, bad, then you're still in the depth of it. It still has power over you. We are not here to fight anything. We're here to illuminate it so it's no longer in operation, because it doesn't operate in illumination. It doesn't operate. And this is the reason that they're not on the planet, and one of the reasons they're even on the dark side of the planet. Now, there are other planets out there that are not on the dark side, but their exposure to the sun is very low, because those light codes affect that operating program. It breaks it down even more. So the ones that are hybrids are having a tough time to keep it, and that's why a lot of rituals have to be played out. What was the second part of the next question?
Was why do musicians, for example, who sold their soul to the devil
Oh,
have
right.
a problem getting out of
Okay.
the contract?
Well, because what happens is when you make the contract, you're basically giving so much power to this operating system, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's power or fear, it's still giving a lot of power to this. And then, as much as they want out, this operating system is you're going to be nobody if you let yourself out, okay? Because the moment that they say, I'm done with the game and I'm not concerned about whatever the ego or that operating system says, I'm done, I'm finished, no, contract dissolved. So the agreement is to hold it until you get to the point you say, no more. However, there's such a key here factor. If you're saying, I can't take this anymore, or you are really disliking and judging the experience or afraid of the experience, then the contract becomes stronger. Because now it becomes much more intensified or basically more locked in. So it's a matter of, that's why I keep saying, acknowledge it, that the contract is there. Great. I made it under a certain term. You know, I wanted, because most of them that make the contract are operating within this, saying, I want fame, I want power, I want to be, wealthy, I want to be in control, I want to sit at the top. None of that is in our natural operating system. That's all in here. However, to stimulate this, it will create the fact that you are nothing, that you are inferior, that you are a nobody, that in some way or another, unless you have fame to acknowledge that you are not good enough. So at that point, it's saying, hey, you want the opportunity? This group here, or affiliates that play with it, you want that? Then you now take on this operating system. And then you will be famous. You will be rich. You will be adored. You will have power over anything and whatever else. And it's sold in that way, which basically just stimulates this very, very powerfully. Now you see it also in other people too that are not in the limelight, that may be running corporations, or the fact that we go into the idea that I need to be famous so I can be rich and I can have power and I can jet set or whatever. It's all within this, which is basically now tapping into more of this to make it happen. So then this has more power, and it also is this part. Because the whole thing about power, money, control, ownership is all the Luciferian operating system. It is not our natural system. Our natural system does not operate in that way at all. It is about cooperation, collaboration, sharing, everything else. It's no ownership and control over anyone, because everyone is you. You come to that realization. This is why oneness is so key, because that actually dissolves a lot of the separation parts. Go ahead.
Mena was just asking, is that why some celebrities commit suicide? Is it indeed suicide?
Well, at times, yes, because it says, I have no other way out because this control structure has got me so tight, so locked up, can't get out, then that's the only way they see out. Could be overdose, could be whatever, because that's the way they see it out. But the thing is, if they start accessing their own consciousness or start realizing it and observing, then they will switch over enough to be able to say, oh, I can say no. And the same thing with people, like I said, back to the power struggles of people in different ownership of companies and whatever else, and saying, okay, we own this, we own that, we control you, we do whatever, and a lot of them are connected to the media and whatever else. The lure is power, money, control. It's never about money, but that's the carrot, that's the in, that's the, because money is equated to power, power is equated to control, and you can control, you actually have a say in anything, and then you can now shape your life the way you want it to. But is it really the life they want, or is the life they've been programmed? Because all of us have gone through the experience of being programmed what life is. Listen to that. What life is. We're convinced what happiness is. So when somebody says, what do you want? Most of the time, what they want is what they've been programmed to want, because they think they've been programmed to believe if you have this, then you're happy. If you have this, then you've succeeded. If you have this, then you're somebody. If you have this, now you are esteemed by others. I need to have toys. I need to have distractions. I need to have freedom. But none of that provides true freedom, true self-navigation, because it's not really yours. If you actually look at your wants, you ask yourself, what part of you wants that? Is it this that was conditionally and programmed? Or is it really your higher self? And your higher self still enjoys having the human experience, but it doesn't want to get caught up in all of that because it's already done that for such a long time for all of us. So when we're looking at that, I mean, I can go on, but at this point, did you have another question or?
Well, there's other questions, but when do you want me to ask this?
Okay, the other ones? Okay, I think I've covered a lot there. I'm going to cover some more tomorrow. Tomorrow. What is it? Thursday. Saturday. Today's Thursday, so it's Saturday. Okay, we'll cover some more on Saturday. Because I have a bunch of other points that I want to cover, but and it just reinforces some of the things we talked about, and it gives you a lot of other insights of how things operate. Because I'm going to give you a little bit more detail where to find all of these operating systems so that you can spot them easier and then choose to participate or not. Again, this is just stimulating what you already know. Okay, go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay, this is a long question that was sent in to us via email. That's
Okay.
the one I'm asking.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay? Because it's directly related to what you were talking about.
Okay.
Okay, Franco said that the satanic program was one of destruction, and a Luciferian program carried low frequency energies of fear, victim aggressor, separation, etc. So something that I'd like to understand is that if all life on Earth was destroyed by the human collective playing with the satanic program of destruction at the time of Atlantis, and as I remember Franco saying that an intervention took place in 1987, when there was no simulation of events that didn't end in the Earth destroying itself. And Franco repeated last night that his soul was one of the architects in the retooling of this planet 15,000 years ago. The question that arises is this. I assume there was a somewhat different matrix operating system in Atlantis, and then, after around 1,000 to 2,000 year respite, a retooled matrix 15,000 years ago, and of course the inverted matrix 10,000 years ago. So in roughly the last 20,000 years, the human race has twice agreed with the satanic program of destruction to the point of the life on this planet being destroyed. I think this is something that needs to be looked at and better understood, both in terms of what is it in the human makeup and matrices that allows for this agreement. Restlessness, boredom, curiosity, all of these. Are we just going to happily keep repeating this pattern as a human collective?
Okay, good question. Yes, all of the above, what you just said. It was, and I did cover it as we were going through it. So in essence, it was, okay, let's see what this can do. Having this operating system that is so far disconnected from its source origin of consciousness. It can't come out of source origin, but creating the program to do that. Now, this is the fourth round for planet Earth. There are other planets that have completely been taken over. So in this particular planet, after the Atlantean time, of course, there's different matrices, different physicalities too. I mean, there are different series of physicalities. I know the planet's been around for what you can call millions of years, but they were inhabited because each planet is just a baseline operating system with a consciousness to create a playground within it. So those are updated along the way. So in after the Atlantis, and there was that period, there was that retooling that took some of the other experiences and said, how can we retool this at this point in time so that it actually is more adhered? Now, originally, when this was retooled, it did not make provision 5,000 years later to have this software program or this whole operating system, this whole operating system plugged in. It wasn't the intent. However, it was presented 5,000 years later, and the souls were up for it. Now, at that point in time, there was already much more progress made, so that the opportunities to get into that destruct cycle was less than the previous, because there's always an upgrading of programs. So the matrix at this time, the original organic matrix that was put in 15,000 years ago, because that was a whole completely rewrite, had enough provisions so that it would not be turned off. It couldn't be turned off. You can disconnect from it, but it's still active and it's still upgrading. Even when the inverted matrix was put in as a secondary layer, which is an offline operating system. Now, even when that was brought in, and it came in 10,000 years ago, that particular operating system, and saying, okay, we're going to give it a go-ahead, the intent was not to run through the same cycles as before. Because this time around, there was also specific alignments were taking place to advance our whole quadrant of our galaxy. That meant that the vibrations kept increasing, which made it less and less impactful of the, what you call, Lucifer operating system. Because the Lucifer operating system, as I said before, was designed for wiping out the total operating, what we call the total matrix. And this is why the inverted matrix was put in and the other one stayed intact, was because it wasn't allowed to do so. Even though there was allowance made at that point, because the souls had brought it in, it said, no, this time you're not removing it at all. It stays. And with the freedom for us to connect to either. Then the inverted matrix got put in, and that was, again, that inverted matrix was there to kind of create a closed loop, meaning that it was operated within confines of an operating system rather than the confines that normally a regular matrix stays within all the planets within its quadrant of the galaxy and then the rest of the galaxy in the universe. So it stayed online and that was offline. So that was already one of the changes. Now we did get to a certain point through this experience, through this operating system and the infusion of this operating system here, that we had the opportunity, and it was presented, not only presented, it actually was at launch point where we would have wiped out planet Earth. When I say wiped out planet Earth, it's wiping out the human experience and all the sentient beings, basically using a reset modality. And that would have wiped out even the matrix, the original matrix. So that was done by nuclear, because the nuclear was brought in by this operating system, because it was never to be used as energy or weaponry. Nuclear was a technology that was used to reset planets. So if you reset it, then you can go and program it yourself. So in that case, every time we got close, which was about 3-4 times now, that got close, there was intervention coming in. And intervention was our brother-sister souls that are closely working with us, that have a vested interest in us because of their connection to us as the planet with the galaxy, within the galaxy, but also that they were the genetic contributors or partly connected to our DNA, that said, no, we're going to make sure that we get close, but they cannot do it. So a nuclear war, a nuclear utilization on a mass scale, which would have wiped out the whole planet, because this program says, oh, we're good for that, because then we get to redesign it. The hybrids are convinced that they're okay and they're brought back in. Of course, that's not true. They have to be reconstructed, and they can't be reconstructed the same way anyways. That's a whole different story. But at the same time, so each time the intervention came in enough for us to be able to continue on the path of expanding consciousness to the point we get to a degree of awareness that we won't utilize it. And so in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, and then the 90s, and in the early parts of 2000, at different points, we had gotten close to activating those things, and there's been reports, and also what are some of the people that whistleblowers, whatever, had said, and it leaked out even through some of the people there, that they have found that a lot their instrumentation, their actually nuclear warheads and everything else had been neutralized completely, because not to be used. So even the operating system that would launch them was disabled. Now, those were our brother sister souls that were just not intervening, but enough to give us an opportunity so that we would still stay on track with what we wanted to do with moving forward. So I know some people say, well, there's no beings or whatever else. Well, beings are other aspects of ourselves in different physical forms, with playing a different dimensional consciousness, that have our brother sister souls that are part and parcel of our galaxy and the universe, to be able to assist us, because we're doing it together. We're never separate. Okay? No one is superior to one another. This whole hierarchy thing is all a construct under this program. So this whole thing is that here's the hierarchy, we are the commanders, and we tell you what to do. But all of this can't exist unless we agree to, and we're becoming more and more conscious to say, no, we're not going to do it, including playing with vaccines, playing with whatever other means that we've done. We're getting to the point of saying, unless we agree, it's not going to happen. And right now, we're losing our appeal to agree, saying, you go do it yourself, but you can't do it without us, because we're numerous, you're very few. So this idea of the hierarchy saying, we are the rulers. This is what works with this operating system. We are the rulers. We tell you what to do. Why do you think religion uses deities as a fictional creation? And by the way, some of the deities were some of these funny looking or operating hybrids that have come along and said, okay, we're your gods or whatever it is. But the reason they use deities is because it's still upholding this whole hierarchy. We're all equal. We're just at different levels of access points of consciousness. That's it. We're all source, no matter what. We're just having different levels of experiences. Go ahead.
So just to be clear,
Mm-hmm.
because he was wondering why we continued to do it over and over again, like why humanity has continually agreed to go through this crazy process? Is
Okay,
it
well-
for our evolution, a higher level or a different level of evolution? Why would we keep agreeing to go through that?
Okay, so good point. I did cover a little bit of it before. First of all, humans, this is the first time this particular series of humans are going through this. Atlanteans were another species. They had a lot of human similarities and access to consciousness, but at the same time, so the whole cycle, again, because of the repeat, was each time it was introduced at different levels of consciousness. Okay, collective consciousness, because let me explain. Each solar system within the galaxy and quadrants of galaxy have chosen to go through different levels of enlightenment and access point of its sourceness, so that they will be able to create what is ideal for whatever experience. Within that, then, when this was introduced as the program, it was the opportunity to say, okay, let's see what progress we can make, being from complete disconnection to destructions to self-destruction. And again, when we're talking about self-destructions, it is destroying, or basically shutting down, the operating system, which is the holographic expression of a physical form. As a soul, even as a human entity, that doesn't stop existing. And whatever is terminated within the physical construct is still maintained within the planet, because our bodies are an extension of Gaia, extension of the planet. So it still stays there. The memory, the consciousness, the experience. So all of it is interconnected. So the thing is, it said, okay, this destruction is really just putting out these physicalities out. Now, again, like I said earlier, and I've said in others, for it to have that access, it had to turn off a lot of its access points when it came to DNAs, because that would have interfered a huge way, because as long as the DNAs were still active and communicating, the species that are connected to us, which are brother, sister souls, would have continued to inject their consciousness, their vibrations, their frequencies, and so forth, really making it impossible for this operating system to even function, and even this to function, and the hybrids wouldn't even be able to, in any way, shape, or form, adopt that. So the answer to that is yes, it allowed it, because at different stages saying, let's see if we could still use this and advance. So it is about advancement. It is about reaching another level of enlightenment, which would not be possible without that operating system. Now, the key here is that this is becoming no longer required. Especially on planet Earth, it's no longer required. It's already decided. So they're not affecting us. That's all that's left is this. And they're waiting for us to get to a point where we say, okay, no more. We're not playing there anymore. So that they can leave, in a sense. So, and this is why it's so transparent, and to the point of saying, look at us, look at us, look at us. So like what we're experiencing right now, creating a boogeyman, because you have to understand, viruses are all manufactured one way or another. Which are just codes. But we have the opportunity to activate those codes and use it to the degree that it serves us. But again, is it outside of our agreement? No, we agree to have that exposure to come in. But in fact, as you can see, that even if we agreed, and we did, on a collective scale to have this come into place, this particular strain that we're talking about, you could see how much effect it has. As much as the illusionary part, and this is what the mainstream is saying, look at this, create fear, 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 but the fear is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So this part of the operating system is getting less and less fed. because we're becoming more immune. We're starting to question things. But that was purposeful in a way, because every part wants to become enlightened until, we will play this role until you become enlightened. Why does a victimizer play the role for a victim? He says, I'm going to play the role until you get out of your victim state and you see that we're equal and I don't have to play the victim role, victimizer, towards you. And if I choose to still support others about it, I will. However, it's not. Go ahead.
This is another question that you had asked. It's Janine. She had said that you said to ask this question today.
Mm-hmm.
So Franco said to ask today about the 12 DNA strands. Why science does not see the strands? Epigenetics are the junk, but how are the strands?
Okay. There are scientists that have acknowledged that DNA is there. I mean, it shows how it functions. Okay, that they're all genetic expressions. They have telomeres. That's been proven and shown. The scientists acknowledge it. The part they don't understand is the amount of influence and what it really actually does, besides the understanding that it creates, it provides certain genetic encodements that are inherent to maintain this physical operation. Okay, so they're acknowledging, and it's really consciousness, energy, and it's a transmitter receiver. Like the same way they're saying, well, I can't see a soul, but you can feel the energies, you can experience it. It's the same thing. You can't see a human entity, but it's there. Consciousness of the body, it's there. A lot of it is because we've agreed not to look at it and see it yet. But that's coming up because there's more and more scientists and other researchers that are noticing, like this whole thing about, some of the other speakers have talked about, we started to notice there's another energy, there's another consciousness that supersedes any operating systems that we have. It actually supersedes how the body functions. Those are coming up to the surface now, more and more. In fact, our thoughts, our feelings, how we represent ourselves and what emotions activate within ourselves actually shapes the reality around us. And you go, how's that happen? How could everything just shape around us? How could our frequency just change? By just changing a state. How could we, in one way or another, be in one emotional state and have ailments, and in another emotional state there is no ailments? They've seen people that are in what you can call labeled as schizophrenic, where they have in one personality they have cancer, the other personality has none, or diabetes and then none. What happens? So they're starting to notice that there's more than the chemistry of the physicality. There's more. There's an energetic field. They're also noticing that it doesn't matter if they take a cell from a human and separate it thousands of miles away or kilometers, that whatever that cell came from experiences. So if it's scared, that cell responds with the same vibration of the fear, thousands away, isolated. Because there's that connection, which they're just determining now. And this whole thing with the DNA, they're starting to determine that there's more to this now. And in fact, it plays a bigger role than what we've even understood. So this is why we see, and I'm no artist to design it or even to express it, experience it at this point. We'll try at some point. But it is active, and it is becoming more, people are becoming more aware of its presence and its influence, its role that it plays. Some of the people that are so-called more aware and awakened are talking about the DNA even more, because each of the DNAs have a different channel of frequency and level of consciousness that alters the physicality in a very powerful way, and also how we express and experience ourselves in form, which again is a holographic experience. But it also changes our aura field, it changes the energy we emit, it changes the way we experience certain things. And then certain programs that we may have, like we may have lots of different programs, become deactivated or not active, or more active, or whatever it is. So that's being acknowledged more and more. So what they called as junk DNA is like, oh, it's there, we don't know what it does, because they were dormant and they didn't play a factor. But now they're noticing, hey, they're not junk DNA, because they actually have an influence. They all have encodements in them. But now they're realizing that as they're becoming more online, they have much more influence, because now they carry different spectrums of light, they carry different codes, they carry different levels of expanded consciousness and different variations of consciousness. And that's all becoming present more and more as we're going along. So there's much more realization that we're more than our physical experience. What I'm sharing with you, even the fact of these operating systems, is just bringing that level of awareness so that we're not going into the demonization aspect of saying, oh my God, because the moment we say, well, a Lucifer operating system, this program says, we need to be afraid of it. It can harm you, it can destroy you. Well, your higher self says, it's impossible. If we agree, we can have the physical exit point or extreme experiences, but at the same time, we're infinite, we're immortal, we're source, we're in the field, everything is in that field, everything is played out. So it doesn't matter what role is being played out, it's still all this. It's still that. Nothing exists outside of it. So most of programs have the most powerful impact when it activates emotions. Emotions are programmed. Emotions engage every part of our body. So by doing so, this is why people are feeling much more emotion, either emotion of love or the emotion of fears, because it's merging it. So like, for example, when we say light workers, okay? So you can say, well, there's the dark, and then there's the light. If we keep it the way these operating systems present it, then guess what? It's still separated. So what happens is, somebody that holds light, well, being a light worker, for example, what they're doing is holding a certain light that illuminates this, so it gets to this here, which is 0 point, which is neutrality, which is oneness. It's harmony, balance, full spectrum. Call it what you want. So it's really bringing the balance. The same thing with the masculine and feminine energy. So the feminine energy is coming more prominent, or has been. What is that feminine energy? It's another construct of operation that's basically creating balance. It's not about, or we're shifting from male to female, because that's how we were playing before, is the dominance was one or the other. Now it's emerging and unification, so the energies blend, so there's a balance. It's all about balance now. Okay? So this is what I wanted to say. So if we're saying, I'm a light worker, and then you're demonizing this, then you're just giving power to that. It's just, if you embrace it with love, because when you're a true, much more finite light worker, you don't see the dark as the enemy. You don't see as the dark as something that has power over you. You're just illuminating to bring the balance, so that the polarization, so the merging occurs and it becomes holistic. Holistic is source. Source is full spectrum. Everything exists in that spectrum. So it's full spectrum. Was there anything else you wanted to cover?
Up to you.
I know we have lots more to cover, but
Yeah.
the thing is, I don't want to go too long because I want to give
Okay.
people bites of it
I
because
think
this is
maybe
already
for
heavy.
today that's probably good because there is other little questions
Okay.
around
Anything related
this.
to anything I've talked about?
Let me just take a looky quick. So, what does the splitting of the earth really mean? Does that refer to the operating systems different people choose?
Yes, yes. The splitting of what they call, there was this whole, how can I say? The intent to split and all of that stuff in the dynamics that was originally planned and operated is not really concurrent to or in alignment with where we are now. So the only splitting that has really occurred is, okay, how much of it plays with this and how much of it is blended. So when we talked about two platforms, which are temporarily set because eventually it becomes one platform, even though we had one platform before, it created two platforms, and those two platforms was basically allowing the completion. So the organic 3D, which was originally operated the first 5,000 years, there was the organic, and then it became the inorganic 3D, or what we can call inverted 3D and 2D, inverted matrix, is, so let's call it organic. 3D was not really fully experienced, and the call for a lot of souls were, we'd like to experience the organic 3D before we move on to organic 5D, because it's different experience. And could you remind me about polarity afterwards? Okay. And then we'll, unless it's totally on there. So the organic 3D was a platform that was established, and that was only created back in the end of 2018 and launched the middle of 2019. So that was the first level of split. So in fact, that we had the organic 3D and the organic 5D overlaying planetary platforms, so that we can actually experience the organic 3D and with the option, or also with the 5D, and you can move back and forth, but you create one home residence as your default for a period of time, and eventually the two become one, and it becomes only 5D and plus plus. Okay. The polarity, so that was the one split. The other part of the split is that within the organic 3D and organic 5D, there's an allowance for us to still have 2D inverted 3D and the inverted matrix operating system that still relies on this operating system until we clear that up. There's only a short period of time for that. We've already used up half a year of it practically. No, not quite. But in that essence, then we can experience those parts of it. But by the end of 2022, the intent is to be fully completed with any remnants of the 2D inverted 3D inverted matrix part of it, so that we're in organic 3D and in organic 5D fully. And then we have a certain amount of time where the two will merge, because the souls will be done with the organic 3D. Like I said, the organic 3D was the first 5,000 years, but when we came out of it, we went inorganic, and then we got disconnected from the matrix. So now we're being reconnected to the original upgraded matrix, and the inverted is no longer there. Any stimulation to support the inverted is no longer there. So in fact, that we are at this point, how can I say, more free to be able to step into those parts. We're already there. It's just how we utilize it and so forth. Was I going to say something?
You were going to say something about polarity.
Okay. So the question came up with the fact that, okay, this particular part of the universe and our particular planet still operates in polarity, and it will until we get to sixth dimension. That was the original construct. And the polarity that we're experiencing is not the same polarity that was created at that point, because the original polarity is very fluctuating, very easy to move from one to the other. So we're basically, the polarity was required to say, I'm going to try this, then I'm going to try that, and create this, a balance within it so I can see what the different extremes are. The polarity that was installed with the inverted matrix and all of that was extreme polarity and a complete stuck state of polarity. So, will polarity still exist in organic 3D and organic 5D? A very minimal aspect of it. But that polarity is still active fairly powerfully until we clear out all of this other stuff, and we're in organic 3D and organic. So in organic 3D and organic 5D, we are experiencing polarity as something that you can kind of test from one to the other, but it's not extreme polarity as dark, light, right, wrong, good, bad. No, I'm going to play this experience. Okay, great. I got that out of it. This experience, yeah, now I'm going to merge it and see how that experience goes. So it's a different type of polarity. It's a natural organic polarity. However, the necessity for that level was removed completely, because originally it says we can't, the operating system, this operating system, with this operating system, without having one extreme, you can't experience the other extreme. So for me to experience happiness, I have to have lots of sadness. And if I have lots of sadness, then I can have happiness, or I can appreciate happiness. So I need to have pain to appreciate non-pain. I need to have displeasure for me to enjoy pleasure. That was the accentuated inverted matrix version of it. So it's like you're either the victim or victimizer kind of thing. Neutrality was very obscured, if you want to call it that. So here, 0 point, neutrality, all of that, still has a very minimal amount of sway, but this is your default. It basically, you're always going back to balance point. Always 0 point, always neutrality, always oneness. It's that is our operating system. This is the reason that oneness is coming in. Now, there's different levels of oneness, and I will talk about that in another episode, but the different levels of oneness, because we're not talking about oneness that we see ourselves as just source, and we're one with everything, because that's always there, but we don't use that while we're trying to have experiences in physical form. So the next level, the first level of oneness is realizing, first of all, body, human entity, soul, mind, that is the first level of oneness. The second level of oneness is noticing that you're one with the planet. The third part of it is we're one with every single soul on the planet. We're one with every physical expression. That means that we are here to play together. We're not one better than the other, or we're not separated, because the separation illusion was created through that program and stimulated and supported by this operating system within. So don't demonize your ego, by the way, because a lot of people say, oh, that's Satan. Well, it's not that religious stuff, because that was created as polarity and to accentuate those ideas, but it's not the way it works. So say, okay, I'm learning from it and I'm letting it go, because you have to understand, most of our stories, programs, belief systems were all constructed in inverted matrix 3D, 2D, which are all ego-based mostly, which is this operating system, all connected. So that's what we're purging, but we're learning it, because this was only offered as an opportunity to learn to advance. And this time we said, no, we're not going to extinguish ourselves, because these bodies, they're a marvel. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later. Was there anything else that's pressing to talk about?
That's pressing?
Yeah.
No,
Someone did inquire that to do with the Luciferian program around, was it circumcision initiated as a part of that program for children? Let's see, how does she frame it? Because she asked it a couple times.
Oh, okay.
And so, Um, okay. Is the practice of circumcising babies a systematic ritual that supports the Lucifer program?
Yes, 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 yes. Sacrificing one another, tormenting, abuse, all of that stuff all supports that and is necessary. So a lot of the tradition that was carried about that was superiority and whatever else, saying, okay, we're a superior race, blah, blah, blah. This is the way we can identify ourselves by, instilling that. And it was just sold as an idea. So it is a ritual of that nature. Because if you actually watch the true ritual, besides what the hospitals do, there's more to that than what you see with hospitals that have been supporting. The same thing with women. There are certain traditions and so forth that mutilate women. Removing their clitoris, the what?
The clitoris.
The clitoris, and so forth, because it's evil to have
Center.
the pleasure center, because it's evil to have pleasure. It's all about procreation. It's all about that type of control. So there are rituals that are done that actually support that program, absolutely. And again, we have to, let me bring it all back in alignment before we wrap it up for today. And we'll carry on Saturday, same time, same channel. What we're looking at this point, if we understand, it's all stuff that we've agreed to experience, but now we've come to a point where it doesn't really serve us and support us or where we are going in level of consciousness and how we want to experience the human experience and our playground. Because the design of everything that we've experienced and then the digression of that design was still part of a growing learning experience. But the thing is, please pay attention to how you polarize it or demonize anything. You have to see it for what it is. So there's lots more coming up right now. And especially now that things are really speeding up. If you pay attention and just observe, as the observer, even if you're watching the media, or just watching other people and when they're following a certain protocol, whatever else, if you just watch it as an observer and you connect with your heart when you're observing, you will see the programs, you will see the different polarities, you will see what's there in its true form, so that you can now agree or not agree, accept or not accept, consent or not consent to play. The thing is, we've been programmed to believe that we have no rights, we have no freedom. So the idea that to live on this planet is a privilege, not a right, is part of that construct. It's just an idea that, okay, if we can convince them that, then, they're going to buy into that operating system. We come here, you have full access to everything. Now, in our true operating system, without this operating and this, you're not going to be violent. You're not going to take advantage of each other. You're not going to judge each other. You're not going to compare. None of that exists. That's all within the operating system. Because our natural state is not. Our operating state sees the beauty of every expression, sees the beauty of each and every aspect of yourself. And we'll wrap it up at that. And we'll see you for part 3 of our experience. And I apologize for the issues. Please... we have in the links, there are links that will give you access to certain workshops. We do appreciate, we put a lot of effort here and we're putting a lot of focus to put this content in. If you can support us, that'll be fantastic. It keeps the lights on, it allows us to do all the things that we're here to do. I thank for all the people, I'm very thankful and appreciative of all the people that have contributed, but please feel free to contribute, to share, to like, to subscribe, to all of that. We also have a link to the website, which gives you the opportunity for you to also register as part of the community. That way you'll get notification as different things come up. But right now, we're coming up 3 times a week, which is every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, with additional ones here and there, and sometimes additional more than one, as we feel guided. So the next one is coming up Thursday. So I thank you for coming together and play. Hopefully I didn't blow any circuits, and if so, that's great, because it gives you an opportunity to retool yourself by realigning. And we didn't get to the questions. We have quite a few questions that we will attempt to address next week. Saturday. I will have a few other points I want to cover that we didn't get to, but I didn't expect that we would be able to, because there's lots of points. But we've covered a lot of it already, but the other points would just be more detailed. So I did say I wanted to do shorter videos, but here we are. We set a new platform because we're now over 2 hours and 13 minutes or 14 minutes, whatever it is. So good attempt. But anyways, we'll keep you going. So thank you again.